Hello, and welcome to the Velero community meeting for January 19th, 2021. Jonas is out in another meeting this week, so I will be emceeing. So, as always, we start with status updates.
And that would be me first.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm like all over the place here.
Yeah, no worries.
Trying to put my notes together. I am almost done with addressing the code reviews for the download requests, migration to controller runtime, PR. What I'm going to do is finish addressing. I have 4 PRs. I'm going to finish addressing the code reviews for all of them. Then I'm going to look at if there is anything I can do for the secrets on Bridget's PR, and then review PRs. We have a lot of them, which is great. We have 22 open PRs.
Okay.
And for people who don't know, we had a US holiday and also an additional VMware holiday. So we were off. We had a 4-day weekend.
Okay.
That's it for me.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Next, Bridget.
Hi, everyone. So last week we released v153 of Velero. I will add a link to that, but HackMD's been a little bit slow. So we got that out, which includes a couple of bug fixes, which I know several people have been running into. So hopefully that release will help. I was helped out with some of the internal build processes here that we have for our internal builds at VMware, so I was helping out with some of that. And I've also been working on a POC for the multiple credentials. I got a draft PR up for that, which I'm happy to talk about in a little bit more depth, maybe during the discussion topics. But we're making some progress there. The maintainers team, we do have another meeting later on this afternoon, so I'm going to chat about that there as well. We did have a couple of different approaches that we could take. I picked one of them and kind of ran with it to see how it would go, so I'll get some feedback from folks later. And like carlisia, I also owe a lot of reviews, so I think there were a few PRs that I said that I was going to review last week, and I didn't get around to it, but that is on my list for this week. That's me.
Okay. Any questions for Bridget? Need any help?
No, I think just we'll chat about the multiple credential stuff. I think that's a big blocker for 1.6.
Yeah.
So I'd like to make sure we're all on the same page as that and kind of move forward and make progress there.
Okay, cool. For my update, I'm gonna go back to this. So I've been working on getting Velero 1.5 series into our internal build system. Since we switched over to Docker Build X, it's been a little touchy on our internal build system. So I've been fixing up our build scripts that wrap the Velero make builds. Also last week, I don't have a recording URL for this, but last week, Phuong hosted a design discussion on plugin timeout, which kind of split off into adding context arguments to plugin designs, as well as looking at how exactly we cancel plugins. So we kind of split that work into two phases. I think those are the big highlights for me that I remember. Anyone have any questions for me? Okay. Next is Dave.
Hey, yeah, so got the ED tests working in the various clouds. So we had it so we could run it in kind with the different backend providers. And I got it running with the install and everything in AWS and Azure, and I'll work on vSphere a bit. And then next steps are more tests. So this is the very basic backup test. And also getting some kind of a CI/CD integration so we can get everything run automatically. So that's about it for me. And then, you know, continuing on with architecture, things like that.
Yeah, and as part of the architecture, I think I don't know if we discussed this in this meeting, but we do have a new issue out. Since you mentioned architecture, I'll point people to it.
The data mover one?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Where did I put that?
I think you just scrolled past. I saw like data movement.
There we go.
Yep.
So for folks who are not aware, this is a proposal for adding a layer in. I think actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we did talk about this, but as part of the new architecture, we want to pull in a new layer that lets folks swap out rustic and send to different types of repositories and use different tools for the file system improvement. This is going to be on a 2. Ideally this will be part of 2.0, but it may come in a release somewhere in there. But this is essentially an epic and kind of where we're going. So more of that architecture stuff will be coming out, but I think this piece is fairly independent. And some of that may be coming from the vSphere plugin, which Dave and his team have already implemented a sort of data mover. And let's see. Okay. So any questions for Dave? Cool. Okay. I will move on to discussion topics. Carlisia.
Just wanted to let everybody know we are using GitHub discussions now. We are using it for different topics. You can see there on the left, we have a list of categories. And one big change is that we are trying to shift the community support to the discussions and to make it easier for other people to also jump in and help. So anything when people come and ask, open an issue and ask a question, if we have to ask them, hey, what is this? We probably should be moving those issues to community, to the community support Q&A discussion and have that discussion in there. If we do find that it's a bug or something that needs to be fixed, the bug, like or an enhancement, then we'll open an issue and link to it. But all the back and forth that we've been doing on issues, we are going to be moving to discussions now. We're going to be asking people to start a discussion when they ask us questions instead of asking them to open an issue.
Cool. Yeah, and if you check out this board and you see that there's something you can answer, please feel free. We would very much appreciate it. But this part of the goal is to get people talking to each other as well.
Yeah, and if you have the right answer, I don't know if the original poster can mark an answer as the right answer. I don't know that yet, but we can definitely mark any answer as the right answer. And when people who answer with the right answer gets that check mark, it counts as a contribution for as far as the GitHub profile goes. So it's a little incentive.
Yeah, I don't. My current script for grabbing the community support or community contributions does not take this into account, but I might look to see if we can pull that in.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, we haven't, like, we did this really quickly. The community shout outs category. I was the one who suggested the category. What I was thinking was to, in addition to having the shout outs here, we should paste that list of contributors in that as a post on that category. Just it stays there for prosperity. It's easy to see, and we can also add contributions that is just not code. Like if someone helped out on a PR, we can add it there and recognize, like use that as a means to recognize and broadcast our appreciation for contributions.
Yep.
And then, and also anybody can jump in there and do an appreciation.
Cool. Anyone have anything else? Any questions about the GitHub discussions? Anything like that? Okay, we will move on to Bridget.
Hello again. So I mentioned that I'd be happy to chat about the POC that has been done so far for the multiple credentials work. So there's an existing PR with the design doc, and we haven't decided yet on the approach that is going to be taken. So there were two kind of main approaches that we as a team had discussed, and then also that have been written into the design doc. So currently, all the credentials that are made available to a plugin are passed through the environment variable that matches like the plugin provider, and that is set in the Velero deployment. So our options in order to allow multiple plugins to use different credentials was to either set the environment on a per plugin basis or pass the credentials into the plugin such that each plugin would then be responsible for instantiating a client to talk to the provider. So the POC that I've done so far is to pass the credentials into the plugin via the config. So that is what I have in the Velero PR. And then there's also a corresponding PR for the AWS plugin to kind of show how that would look and the kind of necessary changes there. So I don't know if you want me to actually do like a demo or not, or whether we just want to chat about it. It's up to whatever folks would think would be useful. Oh, there is a lot of stuff in this PR, Noel, and I noticed that you're scrolling through it. If you go to the set of commits, the change that I've added is the latest, or sorry, the last commit in that list, because I have based it off a couple of branches, because carlisia had already done the work to change the CLI to be able to accept a credential argument. So it's kind of based on that work. It's kind of building off of that. So I'd like to get her PR review first, and then get that in, and then go from there.
Yeah, I'll get that in. I'll get that. I think I need to make changes to that PR. So I'll get that done today.
Yeah. Well, it's worked excellently so far for what I need to do. I haven't need to make any changes to it.
And Bridget, when you say it's in the config, is it in the bsl.config?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so at the point whenever we want to, so if you look in that, I've modified the new backup store function so that it takes a credentials getter essentially. And what that will do is based on the secret key selector, which is the credential field set on the BSL, it will fetch the credential. Sorry, it'll fetch that secret and then write it to a file and then pass that file path through the config so that whenever the plugin is running, it checks the credentials file key in the config and then uses that as its source of credentials rather than the environment. If that makes sense.
And since it's a POC, I'm guessing you've only done it with AWS. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mentioned on the PR that it doesn't yet take into account the volume snapshot locations or RESTIC, but I've got it working such that you can create a BSL with the credential argument that was added to the CLI, and then it'll do some validation on that credential to say, does it exist or is it valid? And then it will write it to a file and then pass it through. So it's essentially taken the AWS environment variable out of the deployment and then only relying on the credential being passed through.
Cool. Yeah, the main issue I see here will be with RESTIC because RESTIC isn't in a plugin right now. So we may have to wrap that such that we do the credentials getter, set the environment variable for RESTIC, and then unset it or something, or set it only for those commands.
Yeah, I think there might be, I haven't looked into it yet, but I'm kind of hoping that RESTIC might have some different command line options that you could pass in the config file that you want to use, or if it's just the environment, then yeah, like you say, we can set it and unset it before invoking the RESTIC command. I think that'll be easier to do than it would be for the plugins because we create the plugin processes using the HashiCorp Go plugin library, and then that means that it's like several nested layers deep as to when it would actually like invoke or create the process, whereas for RESTIC, like the code that we use for starting the process is stuff that we manage, which is a bit easier to deal with.
Yeah, it also, so the Azure plugin actually has one of the parameters is the name of the environment variable it should be using for some of its credentials. So that may be a little funky.
But I think that if I understood correctly, I can't remember if it was Ashish that mentioned it or I think we spoke about before the break, is that for the Azure plugin, it doesn't actually have a way to pass in a file. So what we do instead is write all those. It's essentially a collection of environment variables. We write that to a file and then load all of the environment variables in that file into the environment before creating the Azure client. There's some weird behavior, if I remember, with the Azure one.
So,
but I think that this would essentially work the same. It's just that instead of reading the environment variable to load the file from, we would load the file from the path passed in the config.
Yeah, the way
well, the environment the parameter that I'm thinking of is actually a name of an environment variable.
Right.
Yeah. So the difference with Azure is for the data we need, they have no common file format. AWS has their AWS credential file format. GCP uses JSON tokens. But Azure, what we needed, had no standard file format. So what we ended up doing was taking a long time ago, the Azure setup was, hey, go define all these environment variables. And so instead, what we said is define all these environment variables in one file. And then we essentially use the equivalent of bash sourcing to get them into the environment. There's a Go library that can pull it in. But it sounds like what Dave might be saying here is you don't just need the credentials file, you need the name that it would get put into.
Yes, that seems to be the way it's working. We can look at it a little bit more. Anyway, it's a little funky.
Yeah.
And the vSphere plugin is piggybacking off of whatever the AWS plugin is using for the S3. So we'll probably need to make sure that works right. So
yeah, so I think like the way I think in the design doc that we intended this to work is that we will leave the existing environment variables there. So if you already have a deployment and you're relying on those environment variables, that will all still continue to work. It's only if you're creating new backup storage locations where you explicitly specify that you want a particular secret to be used that would then use that. So it would be up to the plugin, or like if you're using a particular plugin, to make sure that if it supports multiple credentials. So yes, we'll have to make a change to the vSphere one, but as long as the user isn't trying to use multiple credentials with vSphere, it should all still work as before.
And like you said, you haven't gotten to the VSL stuff, so the vSphere plugin. No, the vSphere plugin doesn't use VSLs anymore. Never mind.
But yes, it still needs more discussion, more work, but it was more, I wanted to make sure that what I had in my head would make sense and would actually work. And so I got to the stage where I got a BSL and it said it was available, so it correctly validated. So
Awesome.
it's some progress.
Oh, thank you. Go
Just
ahead.
have a quick question.
Yeah.
So this is for the Velero to give the credentials to the plugins. How this is, I know that we have a design or a request to have the support of multiple credentials for AWS, for example.
Mm-hmm.
How does this touches the design?
Yes, so this is essentially the work that is going to enable that, so that whenever it will allow you as a user of Velero to have multiple backup storage locations, and each one of those can be configured to use a separate set of credentials. So
Gotcha.
you could have one BSL which talks to one AWS account and another one that talks to a different one.
Okay. So this is a building block for that.
Yes.
Change. Gotcha. Okay. That's great.
Yeah.
Looking forward for this feature, by the way.
Yeah. So I think the kind of key thing here is that we're coupling the backup store and the credentials getter kind of together in a way at certain levels of the code, so that, like Bridget said, the BSL has a pointer to a secret, a Kubernetes secret, so that you can do different secrets per BSL instead of one for all of AWS or one for all of Azure or one for all of GCP or OpenEBS or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. Any more discussion or questions for this particular topic? Okay, cool. Thank you for driving a POC on that, Bridget.
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay, and then next up was Phuong with an update from our discussion on Friday.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So basically, it's similar to what Nolan has talked about at the beginning of our meeting, that we decide to split the issues, the problem into two separate major topics and one minor topic. So the primitive one, we want to enhance the plugin interface so that it will able to text in the golang context object. And we will, if we do need to do timeout, we will need to do timeout on that context object. So that brings a question whether we should enhance the interface. How do we enhance the interface so that it will not disrupt the current provider, right? So we propose that to add another function, each of the function in the interface, we add another function. Let's just say, if it is, let's just say, execute, then we will enhance, we have another function called execute with context, for example. And so that if the provider only provide the function execute, then we still able to run it. If the provider decide to support the context, then we will execute the execute with context function. So that this way that even the everyone can be able to work, and it can, backward compatibility with the old version. So that brings up to the second topic, which is the versioning, right? So I think Dave can bring out this point that we need to a way to start versioning the Velero plugin interface so that we can check the version to make sure the code that we are currently running would be compatible with specific version of the plugin, so that and so on and so forth. That is a long-term one, because I think Dave has pointed out that as of right now, we don't have many plugins. We only have a very handful of plugins. So if we need to update an interface, the plugin interface, we can force everyone to upgrade at once. But that is not going to be, work well in the future. In the long term, we will have more Velero plugin, add-in, and so on and so forth. So he proposed that we should start talking about versioning, creating a version so that each of these codes can check these kind of versioning to make sure to call the appropriate function accordingly. So that is the thing that's actually the minor topics that we spin off from that. So we will create another design for the primitive enhancement for Velero plugin with context. And we also create another topic to talk about versioning. So those are the first set of topics that we decide on last Friday. And the second topic that we decide on is that my original design to enhance the backup plugin with the timeout, we have to change so that everyone who wants to enhance a specific workflow, for example, in my case, I want to enhance the backup plugin. Other people want to enhance their restore plugin, for example, then they can add in those specific topics on the workflow on how to use the primitive that we talked earlier on the timeout plugin to satisfy their workflow. For example, in my case, my ultimate goal is not just for the timeout of the specific PVC, but my ultimate goal is that I want to have a timeout for everything inside that specific pod when I actually execute the queries of the pod, and then do everything to back up inside that pod, and then at the end I unquery that one. So that is the timeout, the ultimate timeout that I want. So these kind of high level timeout object will be created separately by each of the interests. It is a company or a vendor that has interest in that topic. So basically, that is the summary of what we discussed on last Friday. I have the recording of the meeting, and Nolan have captured it in the hack MD. I will share it at the end of this meeting. I will add it into this document here, so everyone who are interested in reading or literally watching those that meeting, we can do that. That's it from me.
Cool, thank you. I'm just organizing these notes a little bit. Any questions for Phuong? This topic. So yeah, in terms of getting this high-level pod timeout, we're going to get the golang context into the plugin interfaces, and to get moving on that soon, we're going to use new with context variations for each function. And then once we have the context kind of available to everything, then we're going to take step 2 is probably going to break down into a larger subset of work. But we'll look into how to use that context such that we can cancel things like backup jobs safely if they hit the timeout, and clean up any resources that they might be using for snapshots or anything like that. And then step 1 raised the question about plugin versioning. And I think this comes up in a lot of design docs. And so we've got an issue out there to gather kind of what we're looking for and to see what we can do with the current Go plugin version negotiation that they support. Okay. Any other discussion topics that folks have? Okay. I also wanted to take a quick look at our 1.6 board. Bridget already kind of hit on the major item, which was I need to find it on the board. It's not on the board. Okay, I need to fix that. The multiple credentials support for Velero. That's kind of our big ticket item for 1.6, and we obviously need to get back to this. So I'll get this back on the board. We also have the end-to-end testing, which is moving along. Those are kind of our huge things. We got a 1.5.3 release out with some of our bigger bug fixes to keep people covered in the meantime. But I think where I'm at is I would like to, unless we find any major problems with the POC that Bridget's working on, my current thought process is to move forward with that approach until we hit a blocker, so we can get 1.6 kind of delivered soon. So yeah, I just wanted to go over the board there. Any questions?
I am looking at the existing things that are in the to-do column. How much of that do you think we'll try to get done for 1.6, or is it going to be a matter of we'll pick the biggest things that we know we really want to get out, and then we'll cut it off there?
I think we need to pull. Yeah, I think we need to revisit our prioritization and get a 1.6 out and move a lot of stuff to 1.7. So I need to go back over this board and see what we can bump. But my main concern is getting this multiple credential support, and at this point, getting multiple credential support, and then fixing any really important stuff out of here, like restoring if PVCs are 100% utilized in Rustic. That's a problem. And the go get and go install stuff.
There is a PR
for that. Yes, right.
It's work in progress. There's still some changes. That is one of the PRs that's on my list because I started to review it, and I need to follow up with the person who's working on that.
Cool. Yeah, and some of these tech debt items right here, I'm guessing we're not going to be able to get to just for timeliness. So we may have to bump them. A bunch of these are on me, but yeah, I think I need to revisit this stuff, but I don't think everything in this to-do column will get just out of timeliness. We wanted 1.6 to be out in December. Clearly, it's not going to happen. So yeah. If we can get the multiple credential support in for AWS, Azure, and GCP, then I personally would be happy. And the end-to-end testing is just going to be ongoing. Kind of, so we'll get what we can in there, but the components there are not directly built into, they're not built directly into the deliverable. But obviously, more test coverage is more better. So yeah, as much of that as we can get done, we will. Okay. Oh, thank you, Phuong, for adding the recording. All right, if there's no more discussion topics, I have to apologize. This is on me. As was mentioned earlier, there is a big buildup of PRs, and so I do have planning for the next TKG release this week, but I'm going to prioritize over other things PR reviews this week. So other coding things I have that are going to be put on the back burner, like my internal build stuff. So apologies to everyone who has PRs waiting on us. There were some, speaking for myself, there's some family medical emergencies and some people had extra vacation. So we will get that rectified this week. And with that, unless anybody has anything last minute, I think I can get, oh, Dave, I see your hand.
One last thing I forgot is Nolan and I are actually doing a presentation at the Data Protection Working Group next week on Velero. And that'll be next Wednesday, the 27th at 9 a.m. Pacific.
Yes, and if you are not a member of the Data Protection Working Group, we highly encourage you to go. I think, Dave, you've been attending that pretty regularly now, haven't you?
More or less, yeah.
If you want to get in on that, I'll link the Google group, but it's also, let me find the Kubernetes Slack channel.
Yeah, there will be a lot of familiar face there.
Yep. That is the 26th, yeah. WG-data protection on. Okay. All right. Then I will give everyone 20 minutes back, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.